The hallway of Jefferson Middle School buzzed with chatter as the lunch bell rang, echoing through the long, beige corridors. Students spilled out of classrooms laughing, teasing, trading snacks, the usual midday chaos. But in room 207, the noise faded to a sharp silence. "Aaliyah, that's enough!" snapped Miss Patterson, a tall, stern white teacher with a voice like chalk on glass. 13-year-old Aaliyah Thomas sat frozen in her seat, her dark curls framing a face that was equal parts pride and defiance. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't thrown anything. She had simply said, "That's not fair." But in Miss Patterson's classroom, tone mattered more than truth. "I said that's enough," the teacher repeated. "If you can't learn respect, you can spend the afternoon in the office." Aaliyah frowned. "I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just explaining." "That's talking back!" Miss Patterson snapped, slamming a hand on the desk. "Go! Now!" The other students went quiet, eyes wide. Some whispered, others stared at their notebooks, pretending not to see. Aaliyah stood up slowly, shoulders tight, trying not to let her voice shake. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. "Principal's office," Miss Patterson said coldly. "And take your things. You're suspended for insubordination." The word hung in the air. Heavy, adult, ugly. Suspended. By the time Aaliyah reached the front office, her hands were trembling. The secretary avoided eye contact. The principal, Mr. Gray, barely looked up from his desk when he signed the slip. 3-day suspension. Maybe this will teach you to control your attitude. Aaliyah bit her lip to keep from crying. Enough, he said, cutting her off the same way Miss Patterson had. "Your mother's been called. You can wait outside." Outside the office, she sat on the cold bench, clutching her backpack. Her heart pounded, anger and humiliation mixing until she didn't know which hurt more. She looked up at the trophy case, full of faces that didn't look like hers, and wondered why speaking up always felt like a crime. An hour later, her mother, Danielle Thomas, arrived, storming through the doors in a navy coat and heels. She was furious, but not surprised. "This again?" she said, voice trembling with anger. "Every time my daughter uses her voice, she's labeled loud or disrespectful. When will that stop?" Mr. Gray tried to sound calm. "Mrs. Thomas, she challenged authority. That's unacceptable in any classroom." Danielle crossed her arms. "So, asking a question is challenging authority now?" The principal sighed. "Look, the decision stands. You can appeal to the school board if you want, but—" He never finished the sentence. The secretary's phone rang and her eyes widened as she answered. Sir? It's the mayor's office. They want to speak with you." Mr. Gray frowned. The mayor's office?" Danielle turned sharply. "What for?" The secretary hesitated. "They said it's, about a student." "Aaliyah Thomas." Everyone froze. A few minutes later, the principal was on the phone, his face turning pale. Danielle couldn't hear what was being said, but his tone shifted fast, from confident to nervous to outright panicked. When he hung up, he looked at Aaliyah like he was seeing her for the first time. "The mayor," he said slowly, "would like to speak with you immediately." Danielle frowned. "Why?" Mr. Gray swallowed hard. "Because he says Aaliyah is his daughter." The room went dead silent. Aaliyah blinked, confused. His what? But the truth, and the shock that came with it, was only just beginning. The next morning, Jefferson Middle School didn't feel like a school at all. It felt like a stage. Teachers whispered in the hallways. Students peeked around corners. The janitor stopped mopping mid-swipe when he saw the row of sleek black cars pull up in front of the building. The American flag outside flapped in the wind as the city's seal gleamed on the car doors. Inside, Principal Gray was sweating through his collar. His office had never looked so tidy. Papers stacked neatly, blinds straightened, even the candy bowl refilled. He checked his tie twice, then 3 times. "Is he really coming here?" Miss Patterson asked nervously from the doorway. "The mayor?" Gray wiped his brow. "Apparently, and he wants to talk to your student." "My student?" she said, her voice tightening. This is ridiculous. That girl was rude, plain and simple. I don't care who her father is." Gray turned sharply. "You will care, because if this goes badly, we're both finished." Before Miss Patterson could respond, The double doors at the end of the hall opened. Mayor Daniel Carter walked in. Tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked as if it belonged on a magazine cover. Cameras flashed from the reporters who had followed him in, their lenses catching the glint of his wedding ring and the quiet power in his stride. Behind him walked Danielle Thomas, Aaliyah's mother, her expression a storm of pride and anger. And between them, holding her backpack nervously, was Aaliyah. The whispers rippled instantly through the school. That's the mayor? That's her dad. Wait, Mayor Carter has a daughter in our school? Principal Gray rushed forward, forcing a smile. Mr. Mayor, it's an honor. But the mayor didn't shake his hand. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Save the formalities, Mr. Gray. I'm not here for politics. I'm here as a father. Gray stammered, Oh, of course, sir. We may have had a misunderstanding regarding Aaliyah's conduct. The mayor turned to Aaliyah. Sweetheart, can you tell me exactly what happened? Aaliyah glanced around, the teachers, the cameras, the faces watching. Her voice was small but steady. She said I was talking back, Dad. But I just said it wasn't fair that she called only the boys to answer. I wasn't yelling. The mayor looked at Ms. Patterson. Is that true? Ms. Patterson's face flushed. Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, she spoke out of turn. So did half her class, Danielle interrupted, stepping forward. But only one got suspended. The mayor's voice was quiet but carried across the room. Ms. Patterson, I've spent my career fighting to make this city fairer, in housing and policing and opportunity. But fairness starts here, in schools, with teachers who are supposed to see every child equally. He took a slow step closer. You looked at my daughter and decided she was trouble before she even finished a sentence. The teacher's mouth opened, then closed again. No words came out. Mayor Carter turned to Principal Gray next. And you signed off on her suspension without even asking what happened? Gray swallowed hard. I followed procedure, sir. Procedure, the mayor repeated. Is that what we're calling bias now? The silence was suffocating. Reporters scribbled furiously. The superintendent, who had quietly joined the crowd, shifted uncomfortably. Finally, the mayor knelt down beside his daughter, meeting her eyes. Aaliyah, he said softly, you did nothing wrong for speaking the truth. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for using your voice. Her lip trembled slightly, but she nodded. Then the mayor stood, his voice firm again. As of today, this suspension is revoked, and I'll be meeting with the district board to ensure new bias training for all faculty in this school. We're not punishing kids for confidence anymore. Applause broke out from the hallway. Parents, teachers, even some students who had gathered to watch. Miss Patterson stood frozen, her face red, unable to meet Aaliyah's eyes. Principal Gray tried to regain control. Mr. Mayor, surely we can discuss this privately? The mayor looked at him one last time. You've had plenty of private conversations, Principal. This one needed to be public. He turned toward the cameras and said calmly, Every child deserves respect, not because of who their parents are, but because of who they are. Then, with his arm gently around Aaliyah's shoulders, he led her out of the office. The crowd parted as they walked, flashes going off, whispers chasing them down the hall. For Aaliyah, it was overwhelming, but also freeing. The world finally saw what her mother had always known. Her voice was powerful, and it mattered. And as she looked up at her father, she realized something that made her chest swell with quiet pride. She wasn't just the mayor's daughter. She was her own. 2 weeks later, Jefferson Middle School was unrecognizable. The buzz of gossip had died down, replaced by a cautious quiet, the kind that comes after a storm. Teachers smiled more carefully now, choosing their words like they were walking on glass. Students watched them differently too. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had seen the clips online, because the story of Aaliyah Thomas, the girl suspended for talking back, had gone viral. News outlets called her the girl who spoke up. Her photo had been on TV, online, even in the city paper, standing next to her father, the mayor, as he promised reform in public education. But for Aaliyah, fame wasn't fun. It was weird, exhausting. Some people treated her like a hero. Others said she'd only been heard because of who her dad was. What no one seemed to understand was that she never wanted any of this. She just wanted to be treated fairly. Her first day back felt like walking into a movie she didn't audition for. When she entered homeroom, every eye turned to her. Some kids smiled, some whispered. Ms. Patterson, her teacher, looked pale but collected. "Good morning, class," the teacher said, voice tight. "Let's welcome Aaliyah back." A few claps broke out. Aaliyah nodded slightly, sliding into her seat. She opened her notebook and pretended to focus on the lesson, but she could feel Ms. Patterson glancing at her now and then, not with anger, but with unease. At lunch, a few classmates approached her. "Hey, that was brave," said Lena, a quiet girl from her science class. "I wish I could have said something when Mr. Gray yelled at me last year." Aaliyah blinked. "You got yelled at?" Lena nodded. "He said my hair was distracting. My mom didn't want to cause trouble, so she told me to ignore it." Aaliyah frowned. "That's not right." More kids started joining the table, shyly at first, then all at once. Each had a story. Being punished for speaking up, being told their questions were attitude, their tone disrespectful. By the time lunch was over, Aaliyah realized something huge. This wasn't just about her. She wasn't the only one who'd been silenced. The next day, she asked the vice principal if she could start a student discussion group. Not to complain, she explained, but to help teachers understand what it's like to be us. To her surprise, the idea was approved, partly because the district was still terrified of upsetting the mayor. But Aaliyah didn't care why. She just cared that they said yes. 2 weeks later, the Student Voice Forum had its first meeting in the library. Aaliyah stood nervously in front of a group of 20 students, her notebook trembling slightly in her hands. Hi, she began. "I'm Aaliyah. You probably already know what happened." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. "I didn't mean for any of it to blow up like that," she continued. "But it made me realize something. We spend so much time being told to listen, but no one ever teaches adults to listen to us." A quiet hum of agreement spread through the room. "So, that's what this is about," Aaliyah said. "Not yelling, not arguing, just sharing. What it feels like to be talked over or ignored or treated like we don't know anything." At the back of the room, someone shifted. Miss Patterson. She'd come quietly, standing by the door, arms crossed but listening. Aaliyah hesitated when she noticed her, then continued anyway. "Respect goes both ways," she said softly. "We're told to earn it, but maybe sometimes adults should earn it too." The words hung in the air. Ms. Patterson's face softened, and for the first time, she saw the girl not as defiant or disruptive, but as a leader. After the meeting, as students filed out, Ms. Patterson approached her. "Aaliyah," she said awkwardly, "I wanted to apologize. I didn't listen when I should have." "You were right." Aaliyah blinked, surprised. "Thank you." Ms. Patterson nodded. "If you're open to it, I'd like to help with your forum. Maybe teachers can learn something from it too." For the first time, Aaliyah smiled fully. "Yeah," she said. I'd like that." That night, as she sat at home doing homework, her father peeked into her room. "Heard the first meeting went well," he said with a grin. Aaliyah shrugged, pretending not to smile. "It's just a start." Her dad chuckled. "That's how all change begins." He paused, looking proud. "You know, kiddo, I may be the mayor of the city, but you're the one leading it." Aaliyah laughed. "Not yet." But deep down, she knew something had changed forever. Not just for her, but for every kid who'd ever been told to stay quiet. Because now, they had someone who had learned how to be heard and wasn't afraid to keep talking. By spring, Jefferson Middle School had become the heart of something no one expected. What began as one girl's punishment had turned into a movement, small at first, but growing louder every week. Aaliyah's Student Voice Forum had expanded to every grade. What started as 20 kids sitting in the library had turned into assemblies, open discussions, and projects that spread across the district. Even neighboring schools began asking to join. The mayor's office didn't interfere. That was the most important rule. Aaliyah had told her father, "If they think I'm only doing this because of you, no one will take it seriously." So, he supported her quietly, funding supplies under a different name, giving schools access to community spaces, and letting her lead on her own terms. And she did. One afternoon, Aaliyah stood on the stage of the school auditorium, speaking into a microphone for the first official Voices Week. a new initiative the district had adopted citywide. Behind her, a banner read, "Listen, learn, respect." Teachers sat among students, not above them. Principals shared stories about the mistakes they'd made. Kids spoke about moments they'd stayed silent out of fear and how they wouldn't anymore. When Aaliyah stepped to the microphone, the crowd quieted instantly. "Hi," she began, voice steady but warm. "Some of you know me as the girl who got suspended for talking back. But I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to talk about what happened after." A murmur of anticipation filled the air. "I learned that sometimes," she continued, "change doesn't start with someone powerful. It starts with someone who's just tired of being ignored. And when one person speaks up, it gives others permission to do the same." Her gaze swept the crowd. Students of every background, some nodding, some wiping their eyes. It's easy to say respect your teachers, and we should. But respect has to go both ways. When adults listen to us, really listen, we don't act out. We grow. Applause rippled through the room. At the back, Ms. Patterson stood beside Principal Gray, both visibly moved. Mrs. Patterson had changed too. She now volunteered to mentor new teachers in cultural awareness training. Mr. Gray had stopped signing suspension slips automatically. Now he held meetings to hear both sides before making a decision. After Aaliyah finished, the mayor, her father, walked quietly onto the stage. The crowd erupted, but he raised a hand for silence. "I didn't come here as the mayor today," he said. "I came as a father. My daughter taught me that leadership isn't about titles. It's about listening. What you've all done here proves that age doesn't define wisdom. Courage does." He turned to Aaliyah, pride clear in his eyes. "You reminded us what respect really means, and this city's better for it." She smiled shyly, whispering, "Thanks, Dad," into the microphone, and the audience laughed softly. The event ended with music, laughter, and hugs. But it wasn't the end of the story. Local news outlets covered it again, but this time, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a celebration. Schools from across the state began reaching out to replicate the Voices Week program. Months later, Aaliyah received an email from a teacher in another state. "Your story changed the way I see my students. Thank you for helping me listen better." She printed it out and taped it above her desk. That night, as the city skyline glittered outside her window, Aaliyah sat at her desk with her journal open. At the top of a blank page, she wrote, "Respect is more than rules. It's recognizing someone's worth." She smiled, closed the book, and turned off the light. Somewhere deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. One voice had started a conversation, and now that conversation was echoing far beyond her classroom walls. Because Aaliyah Thomas wasn't just the mayor's daughter anymore. She was the girl who taught a city to listen.